portfolio management. So obviously, that's where most people's brains go to when they think about utilizing an advisor, someone who's going to manage my money. And I want to start there because that's certainly not the bulk of what we do, but I do want to set that up as far as that's probably the most visible thing that most people think about when they utilize our services. Welcome back to The Money Puzzle. This is Eric Douglas with Family Wealth Planning Partners, joined by my partner,
Aaron McAndrew.
Thanks for spending a few moments here with us today. And the topic for today's episode is the real value of a financial advisor. So many times, we end up talking to, especially a lot of DIY clients out there that are trying to figure out whether or not it's worth it to pay for and utilize the services of a financial advisor. And I figured this might be a good time to break down a little bit more specifically what it is that a good advisor, I should say, I want to quantify that up first, that a really good to great, advisor can offer for their clients and some of the values and services that they do provide. So with that, I don't know if you want to go ahead and start us off, but I did want to kind of set this up with, part of this idea came from a study that Vanguard did last year. They published a white paper in August of 2022 that talked very specifically around, they did a massive study around the value, or they try to quantify what the alpha was, an advisor's alpha, what was the value or the worth that they were providing for their clients. And off this alpha, they found that they added about over 3% on average, 3% worth of value to a client's portfolio. And you would think that's only tied up with portfolio management, and that's certainly something that we'll talk about today. But, how do you quantify that within the realm of the portfolio specifically? But what are some of the ancillary benefits that contributed to that additional overall performance within a client's investment portfolio?
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of times, and I'm going to start off with a story here in just a second, but I think a lot of times so many clients are thinking about, what does the financial advisor do for me? And they look at their portfolio, and the only thing they tie it to is the return. What's the account doing? Am I making more money in this account than I would be if I'm doing it myself? And I think that's really the only thing they put there. However, just yesterday I had a conversation with someone. I was at a conference, and I had a conversation with somebody that came up and was asking questions, that's thinking about retiring in the next couple of years. And this person made it very clear that she does not have a financial advisor, that she does everything herself. And I asked her the question as to why that was the case. And she said, because I want to keep my fees low. I don't want to pay people for something that I can do myself. So I just asked her, I said, if you can do all of this yourself, why have you asked me 5 or 6 questions about what you should be doing for your retirement? And she kind of smiled like that,
Yeah.
And it came down, we had a longer conversation, but it came down to it that she felt like when she used to work with an advisor, and she felt like she was being sold something. Every time that she met with the advisor, she felt like she was being sold something.
Yeah.
So she didn't feel like she could trust the person and whatnot. But she tries to research stuff on her own, but she didn't really see the value in it until we started getting a little further in the conversation as to, she's asking these questions. She's asking for professional advice on things she should be doing, like which types of accounts should she be taking her income from when she begins to retire or looks at retirement. Mm-hmm. Okay. What about her estate planning? So this person didn't even have a will created. So, how is she going to pass money on to her heirs? What types of investments should she have in her accounts? Right now, she literally said she was just in a target retirement date fund in one of her accounts. The other fund, she is in an S&P 500 index fund. That's it. So, and again, we've talked about target retirement dates on these, and for some people who are kind of sit it and leave it, that's what those are built for. But when we're talking about the value that working with an advisor adds, I think it's important that we look at several of these little pieces we're going to discuss today.
Yeah, so I think there were really 3 main things, and I want to start first with portfolio management, because obviously that's where most people's brains go to when they think about utilizing an advisor, someone who's going to manage my money. And I want to start there because that's certainly not the bulk of what we do, but I do want to set that up as far as that's probably the most visible thing that most people think about when they utilize our services, right? But trying to quantify that, how is it that, a properly managed portfolio can really add much alpha, if you will, or much value to a client's overall portfolio. And it came down to a few different things according to specifically to this Vanguard study, but these are all very, very true. Number one was suitable asset allocation. Okay, using broadly diversified funds or ETFs, avoiding too much concentration in individual stocks or individual specific holdings, because that opens you up to different types of risk. You're always subjecting yourself to market risk in some way, shape, or form. Okay, when you are invested in the stock market, and so many people, we say the market as this general term, and most people don't even truly understand what the market is. But there's different types of market risk. One type of market risk is business risk. When you have too many of your holdings or too much of your money wrapped up in one or two specific holdings, you don't have a broadly diversified portfolio. It's akin to putting all of your eggs into one basket, so to speak. And that can lead, it's great when you get a stock like Apple over the last decade that's just gone up, 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 up. Well, history shows us that over time, that's not going to happen in perpetuity. Okay, at some point, Apple's going to come down. Apple will not be a top 5 stock forever. Go ask General Motors. Go ask General Electric. What were some of the other ones? Yahoo. That was a top 5 stock. Really, not even that long ago, going back to the early 2000s. The history is littered with these top flight stocks that came back to earth eventually, because economic cycles, they come in, they go out, right? What's in vogue today won't be in vogue in 10 years. So today, when you look at, or when you have a recency bias, it's easy to think that Apple and Google and Amazon are going to dominate the world for the next 20 years. That won't be the case. Okay, it just won't. New players will come up. They'll get too big. You get to a point where your stock can only grow so much, right? And they'll come back down to earth a little bit. It's inevitable. It's a natural cycle when you look at things in the stock market. So helping clients to build a more broadly, properly diversified portfolio. And diversification doesn't just mean having a bunch of different funds.
Right. And that's different for everyone.
Yeah.
So it's different than what their neighbor's in or what their family member or whatnot might be in. So building that diversified portfolio looks different for every client, especially in the different stages of what their life is.
Yeah. So, but for example, when you're building a broadly diversified portfolio, value versus growth, small cap versus mid cap versus large cap, domestic versus international. So if I say I want to track what the market does, okay, which subset of the market is it that you want to track? Because most people refer to the Dow Jones or the S&P 500. Those are large cap indices. They only track a very, very small segment of the market. The Dow Jones Industrial is only made up of 24 stocks. And the S&P 500 is obviously made up of 500, right? Well, you need to go to like the Russell 3000 to get probably a better indicator of what the overall market as a whole is doing, because it's going to be far more inclusive. But no one ever really talks about that index because the S&P and the Dow typically take up all the headlines, right? Another thing as it relates to portfolio management. So finding cost-effective funds. And you were making the point earlier to the lady that was going to do it herself. She was going out on a limb and trying to find like the lowest cost funds.
Lowest cost, yeah.
Okay, so there's a little bit of a balance there, right? Because you can go out and you can find the lowest cost funds. What's the old adage? You get what you pay for sometimes. I'm not sitting here saying that all of the lowest cost funds out there are the worst funds in the world, but there is value to maybe having a fund that internally its costs are going to be maybe a little bit higher than the lowest of the lowest funds that you're going to find out there, right? Now, with that being said, on the flip side, so many times I see clients walk in with a portfolio that was constructed, let's say, from an advisor 10, 15, 20 years ago with high-cost mutual funds. Yeah. Easily, we can pay for ourselves by just moving those high-cost mutual funds into a much lower-cost exchange-traded fund ETF portfolio. That alone is going to lower their fees enough to justify the cost of utilizing our services. Not even relating to any of these other subsets or points that we're making.
And I would even make the point that most people that I meet with or talk with at least don't even know. When I look at their statement, they pull it in. If it's a client, if it's not a client, but a prospect, somebody that I've met with the first time ever, and they say, "Hey, I've got this account here," and they pull their statement up, they don't even know what share class
no clue
that is. They have no idea what the internal expense ratio is on there. I'll have to look all of that information up and show them what that cost is. So the only thing they look at is anything they see on that statement that says fees or withdrawals or anything that comes out of that account. That's what they're looking at, is what they believe that cost to be. And a lot of those types of accounts don't actually disclose what the fees are that's being paid to the financial professional, because it's a commission-based account and it's all done internally. So when you bring all that up and you show that expense ratio of a fund that they may have been in for 20 years or 15 years or whatnot, and you're looking at those expense ratios and showing them, hey, this is truly what you're paying on top of what you're seeing on the fees that are coming out there. And what are you getting out of this? That's the first question I usually ask. What are you paying for? And sometimes they've not met with the person, if there is even a person on there. Sometimes most of the time the answer is, I don't know. So you're already saying, hey, I don't want to pay too much, but you don't even really know what it is that you're paying.
Yeah, absolutely. Know what you own for sure. And as it relates to those old commission accounts out there that are free, right, or they appear to be free, sometimes those tend to be the most expensive accounts and most expensive funds out there. Another big one, as it pertains specifically to portfolio management, rebalancing. Most people don't understand or include any type of a rebalancing strategy within their overall portfolio construction. What I mean by that is, for most, if you don't understand what rebalancing is, say if the proper allocation based on your risk profile is to have 50% stocks and 50% bonds within your overall portfolio. Well, if stocks have a particularly good year, okay, let's say that percentage now is a little bit out of whack, and now you've got 60% worth of stocks in your portfolio against 40% worth of bonds. Ideally, you would want to rebalance your account to get back to that initial 50-50 split in order to be in line with what your true risk tolerance is. Because the greater amount that you have in stocks, when that allocation gets out of whack, essentially the greater risk that you've exposed yourself to if we have a market correction. So with 60% of your account now invested into stocks, you're opening up yourself to far greater losses if the market were to take a turn, right? So it's always about making sure you're maintaining your proper risk allocation within your overall portfolio, and that is a big piece that most people don't truly understand. And just rebalancing alone can typically add over about 1% worth of value over a long time frame.
Correct. Yep.
I think that another thing too to consider is asset location. Okay, what funds belong in what types of accounts? Because not all funds from a tax perspective are going to be treated the same. It's one thing to think about, I have to pay taxes on this type of an account, but most people don't truly understand how a stock or a fund is truly taxed. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
So sometimes I'll see people in a non-qualified account, or what we call a non-qualified account, but a lot of people just call an investment account.
Brokerage account, investment
account, whatnot. So and sometimes they're just direct fund companies that are there, not necessarily a custodian like a Fidelity or Schwab or whatnot. They're just direct there, and they're mutual funds that are being held there. And they always tell me, well, I don't have to pay any taxes unless it's a capital gains tax. But those funds actually issue capital gains at the end of the year. When they do that, you're going to pay taxes on that. And those funds, if they're not tax managed funds, meaning they're trying to they're being managed by tax conscious managers to buy and sell to offset the losses with the gains and try to pay you, so you pay the least amount of taxes that you possibly can pay. If they're not conscious on that, and there's a lot of turnover there, there could be a down year in the market, but because of when they purchased those funds and when they sold those funds, there's a massive capital gain, and you're turning around paying more taxes than what you would need to be paying in a taxable account on gains when you technically see your account balance going down. So that's something to really be conscious of, is what funds belong, what types of investments, really, not even just funds, what types of investments belong in which type of an account. When we're talking about a Roth IRA, well, we know that's tax-free growth. It's on a Roth IRA. A traditional IRA, there's no taxes paid unless you're deferring your taxes until you are making distributions out of that account. And that's when you're paying income taxes on that. So any buys or sells or rebalances done in either of those two types of accounts are tax sheltered. And we're talking about a non-qualified or one of those brokerage accounts, then we've got a different story.
Yeah, no, for sure. So once again, asset location is a term that probably doesn't get used enough in our business, but it's very important to understand the ramifications of the specific holdings that you have within every single account, and how, from a tax perspective, that's going to affect your overall return. Because some types of funds are going to perform better in certain types of accounts. Is ultimately what we're talking about. So I want to move on from portfolio management, because those are just a few of the ways specifically that an advisor can really add value to your portfolio. But I want to move on from that a little bit and talk more specifically about planning, because ultimately everything that we do, the core of what we do within our firm, and quite frankly, we're not the only firm out there that does this, that has a planning focus, but we focus much more specifically on the financial plan. The plan that we do with our clients will dictate what types of investments or what type of risk tolerance is most appropriate for their portfolio. But when it comes to planning, most people, especially when you're trying to do it yourself, don't truly understand how to put together an effective financial plan or a comprehensive financial plan. I'll give you a couple examples here. I just finished renovating my bathroom. Scrapped the entire thing, right? Down to the studs. We completely renovated our master bath. It was original to the house, almost 20 years old, right? Just needed some serious updating. and so my wife is certainly very, very happy that that's been completed now. But we're going through the process, and we're going back and forth about what we wanted to have done. And there were some things that we were talking about. Oh, well, maybe this, maybe that. But we didn't really know specifically from a layout perspective how best to accomplish maybe what was in our head. We had some ideas, but we didn't know what the best way to accomplish them would be. What did we do? We called in someone who does this for a living. We called in a contractor, and we started bouncing ideas off of the contractor. And, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? What do you think from your experience would look good in this corner? How should we best construct this? And he gave us some ideas that we had not even considered before that, quite frankly, we did implement when we did our bathroom renovation. All that to say, he was a far better planner. He was a far better expert in his field than I could ever dream to be. I'm not a carpenter. I'm not, I'm somewhat handy around the house, right, but I can't renovate my bathroom, not nearly to the degree that he could. Okay, I do this for a living. I look at spreadsheets and I track the stock market and I play with numbers all day long. I'm not a contractor. That's what his specialty was, and that's what we paid him for. Another example, if you go use a personal trainer, okay, you go to a gym and you utilize a personal trainer. That personal trainer isn't going to do the exercise for you, okay? But what is the personal trainer doing? They're putting together a plan. They're writing down very specifically, these are the types of exercises that you need to be doing based upon the goals that you've set for yourself. And usually that's after a conversation that a trainer and their clients have had about what types of goals that they want to meet. So that I'm using those two very specific examples that popped into my head. There's probably numerous others that we could come up with if we really wanted to. But all that to say, it's one thing to know you need to put together a plan. It's another thing to actually do it. And to have someone sitting there with you, holding your hand and holding you accountable and making sure that you're sticking with the plan that you've put together.
The biggest thing that I think that I see, at least because we do come from a planning perspective, we look at everything from the plan first. So when we're developing that plan, the client or the prospect doesn't think of the whole picture. They're just looking at their accounts. They're just looking at where they're at. They're not thinking about, oh, I'm retiring at 55 and how many vehicles am I going to have to purchase over my retirement? They're not thinking about the possibility of long-term care, being at the end of their plan. They're not factoring the cost of what that would look like if I have to go to a nursing home or assisted living or in-home care. They're not factoring in taxes, which is the biggest expense that even in retirement somebody's going to incur. Mm-hmm. So They're not factoring in, hey, I'm going to delay. I'm just going to take my Social Security at a certain age, even though I've got a large amount of money in my 401k or my tax, my traditional IRA, all pre-tax dollars. And if you continue to defer that until you are 73 now or 75 down the road, and you have a massive tax balloon come up here, what does that do to your Social Security? What does that do to your entire tax bracket, all of your income that you're going to have to take out? So there's just a lot of things that they leave out, very similar to what you're talking about there. Same thing happened to me with my basement. Is we were redoing the basement. We had a good idea, but then when we were talking about adding a bathroom down there, the contractor was like, "Well, we can put it over here, an exact different spot that we thought we were going to put it in." And I said, "Well, how are we going to get back here to the storage room?" "Well, we'll just cut a new door in there, and we'll put a sliding door on there, put access. We'll rewrite everything was we didn't even think about doing that."
It's already being accomplished in his head, and you hadn't even thought that idea before.
Exactly. Yeah. And that, again, is why you go out. There's certain jobs that I do around the house. Like I told you on one of these shows, I still cut the grass. I enjoy cutting the grass. It's exercise for me. I like doing it. It looks good when I get done doing it. I don't mind doing that. But there's other things around the house that I'm not going to do. And I'm going to bring a professional in because of that exact reason.
Yeah. I think, too, and I want to kind of move on and start to wrap things up a little bit. We're already 20 minutes in here. But I think when we get to the last section, I really wanted to talk about in relation to the true value of an advisor. I think really this is it. Everything can be summed up into probably this last section: avoiding mistakes. An advisor is someone that's going to help you, hold yourself accountable to the plan that you put together. But more than anything, it really helps you to avoid mistakes. And especially as you get closer an inch into retirement, as you're preparing to live in retirement, a mistake that you make within your retirement, within your portfolio, can have just massive consequences to the lifestyle that you want to live for the rest of your life. You need to avoid those mistakes. And we talk about this a lot when we're constructing portfolio. It's one thing to enjoy all the highs of the stock market, right? And the last decade prior to 2022 was a great example. We had the best decade, I think, in the history of the stock market. Just a wonderful bull run, if you will. That was never going to last forever. And 2022 launched a new economic cycle. Well, if your portfolio was fully participating in the gains of the previous decade, and you're inching towards retirement, and you never took an opportunity to maybe reframe or rebalance your accounts, then guess what? You got to participate in all of the downside in 2022. And you may still be participating in that downside as today. And who knows what's going to happen in the market over the next decade. But here's what I do know. You're at far greater risk participating in the lows of the market versus getting all of the highs. Okay? You can limit yourself on the upside as long as you're limiting yourself on the downside. Limiting yourself on the downside does far greater wonders for the overall return of your portfolio over a long-term time horizon than participating in all of the highs. Because in order to get all of the highs, you have to take all of the risk. And when you're taking all of the risk, that exposes you to all of the downs. And really that is a recipe for success. And so one of the things we need to consider when it comes to a planning perspective is, as someone gets closer to retirement, they need to be focused on moving to an income strategy versus an overall return strategy. Because that income strategy becomes infinitely more important when you enter into retirement than taking the extra risk in your portfolio to get an extra few points of return. And over the long term, it's just not worth it. And 2022 was a perfect example of that. And so avoiding mistakes, I think, is really, really a huge thing that we help with, and really allows us to provide value within, when we're constructing portfolios for clients. What would you say some other mistakes that you see are?
I would say some of the mistakes actually, there's a really good one that just came up about 2 or 3 weeks ago. This is not a client. This was somebody that I was speaking with. Is they want to take money out. They were asking me about, should they take money out of their IRA in order to pay off this debt that they have there. Okay, so my answer to them was no, because the debt that they had they could pay off within a certain period of time, and you can't finance your your retirement. You can finance an asset. You can finance a purchase of something. You cannot finance your retirement. They're going to pull money out of their IRA. That's going to cost them to pay taxes. It was pre-tax dollars in order to pay off a debt that would be paid off within the next 5 years anyway. So pointing all of this stuff out, they wanted to still make that. They were still leaning towards trying to make that distribution to make that happen. It wasn't a massive debt payment, but it was enough when the IRA balance that they had was already down, right? So, again, not a client, but just somebody that asked a question about, well, should I do this or should I not do that? And that's something that you're giving them your perspective on it, and they weren't really thinking about it.
Yeah.
So,
I'll give you one other major mistake that we see a lot that we wish we could help more people avoid, but sometimes after they come into our office, it might be too late. But a Social Security filing strategy. Most people think, oh, I go to retire, I file for Social Security. That's just what you do. That's the most effective long-term strategy for me. Or they probably don't even put that much thought into it, quite frankly. It's just I go to retire, now I'm going to turn on Social Security. That's just what you do. The reality is for a lot of individuals out there, and we can get very granular with these numbers, but it makes a lot of sense in most cases, or at least a lot of cases, to delay taking Social Security for as long as you possibly can. Maybe you don't have to delay it till 70 if you're retiring at 63, but maybe delaying it until 65 or 66 could make a world of difference. When you think about what your Social Security benefit does, your Social Security benefit grows 8% annually for every year that you do not that you do not file for Social Security. An 8% average return in the market, advisors can't guarantee that.
Right.
That's a guaranteed return on your Social Security income for life.
An 8% raise.
Yeah.
Every year.
8% raise every year if you delay or are able to delay receiving your Social Security. Now, not everybody can do this, and this is not catch-all advice for everybody. Of course, everybody's different. But I can't tell you the number of times I've seen clients walk into the office and they just assume that, oh, I'm going to retire and, yeah, I'm going to turn on Social Security. That's the next thing I'm going to do, or I've already done it. That in and of itself is a huge mistake that we can help clients to avoid, that over the long term, over the course of their retirement, pays for itself. I can't even tell you how many times.
And what Eric's mentioned in there about paying for itself, one piece of paying for itself is the fact that if they have a lot of pre-tax money built up in some of these accounts, they're able to draw down some of that, letting some of the air out of the balloon, if you will, before they're required to take out a large amount, and then it puts them into a different tax bracket or causes them to pay significant taxes on their Social Security that they may not have been paying before.
Yeah. So going back to those tax implications that we talked about before, if you have, let's say, $1 million IRA, $1 million 401k, well, when you get to the age of 73, you're going to have to take required minimum distributions, RMDs, whether you need the money or not. Well, if you can start drawing some of that balance down prior to 73 years old, maybe you're able to reduce the amount of income that you have to start taking at 73. Because in effect, if you delay taking money from that account until 73, you could potentially be paying a much higher amount of taxes. So when we're talking about a tax mitigation strategy, we're not talking about filing your taxes and trying to figure out the best tax strategy for an individual year. That's a very micro level tax strategy. That's what CPAs do. Okay. And that's their job, and they do it well, right? But when we're looking at an overall macro level plan, we're trying to figure out what's the best tax strategy for you for the next 20, 30 years. And a lot of times you'd be amazed, sometimes it's drawing down early on your investments in retirement in order to delay taking your Social Security until maybe 68, 70 years old, at which point you can max out that Social Security benefit and increase exponentially, especially if you live past the age of 83, you're able to increase exponentially the amount of income you're able to draw from the Social Security program itself. And we've run those numbers, and we see literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in difference as it pertains to the amount of income that you can earn from that program versus filing too early.
Yeah. And I think the biggest objection to any of that I ever receive is, well, what if you have to live to be X number of age? Nobody knows when they're going to die, and that's the thing. But what we plan for is for you to live to 95. I met a person the other day that's at 98 years old, 96 years old, 97 years old. They would defy the odds at this point. So, but they also made the comment, which I thought was great. They said, TIA CREF hates me because they have a TIA CREF annuity that's paying them guaranteed income for life, and there hasn't been a balance on it for years. So,
he just won't die. He keeps living. Yeah,
exactly. So, and Social Security, he said, Social Security hates me. So, you know, he's defied the odds, but there's so many people that don't. So that's where it just comes down to the planning, making sure you're planning, looking at all the different pieces to the puzzle, and not just, I'm trying to save as much as I can on the costs of what that would, of paying for a financial advisor, because the value is not just in the return. The value is in the whole picture of it. So
yeah, when you're putting together a properly constructed financial plan, we have found pays for itself, and really more so in most cases. And that's what we're here for too. If we're not able to provide value, usually we're able to tell clients that too. But that's so rare that it just hardly ever happens. But all that to say, I think we've laid out a number of different reasons explaining specifically how paying for financial advice, paying to put together a financial plan, can be more than beneficial. And here's one more thing I'll throw out there: peace of mind. There is a real value for putting together a plan and going through the planning process and truly understanding, these are things that I don't have to worry about any longer. Having the peace of mind of knowing that every day that I go to bed in retirement, I know where my income is going to be coming in from the next 10 years. That income is not attached to any specific market risk. In understanding that I don't need to watch the stock market. I don't care what the Dow Jones, I don't care what the S&P 500 does this year, because that's not going to affect my overall portfolio and the success of my plan. More than anything, it also won't have any effect on your overall happiness and the enjoyment, your ability to enjoy your retirement. And really, what are we trying to do when we retire? We're trying to enjoy ourselves. We're trying to have fun. We're trying to live the best years of our life, the best ways that we possibly can. And you need peace of mind in order to achieve that goal. And ultimately, that's hard to put a price on. With that being said, I think we'll wrap things up. We very much appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about the value of a financial planner. If you have any more questions, please visit our website, schedule a call with us, fwppartners.com. If you or anyone else that you think might benefit from anything that we have to say, please feel free to share our content with them as well. We greatly appreciate it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.